My lawyer's Rolex caught the afternoon sun streaming through the windows of his Buckhead office. Richard Hartley, Atlanta's most ruthless divorce attorney, the one who'd gotten that Real Housewife 80% of her husband's assets last year. The one who never lost. "Stop smiling, Veronica," he said, not looking up from the papers. "It's unsettling." But I couldn't help it. In 3 hours, I'd walk out of Fulton County Superior Court with everything. The Ansley Park House, the lake house on Lanier, half of Logan's software company that was worth $12 million on paper, alimony that would keep me in Botox and Bergdorf's for life, all because Georgia was an equitable distribution state, and I'd been the perfect wife for 15 years. Well, perfect except for that thing with Dimitri. But Logan didn't know about Dimitri. Nobody knew about Dimitri except Dimitri, and he was back in Prague now, probably seducing some other bored housewife at a hotel bar. The affair had started 8 months ago at the High Museum Gala. Logan had begged off. Another deployment deadline, another weekend spent coding while I dressed up alone. I was wearing my black Valentino, the one that cost more than most people's cars, standing by the Rothko when I heard the accent. "It represents the void between intention and reality, no." I turned. Tall, silver at the temples, eyes like winter sky. Everything Logan wasn't. Sophisticated, present, interested in something beyond algorithms and server loads. "Dmitri Volkov," he'd said, extending a manicured hand. "Visiting from Prague, art collector, among other things." Among other things. I should have walked away then. But Logan had been gone so much, mentally, physically, emotionally, building his empire while I rattled around our 6,000-square-foot house like a ghost in designer shoes. "Veronica Matthews," I'd replied. "Local patron, among other things." He'd laughed, a sound like expensive whiskey over ice. By the end of the night, we were sharing champagne at the St. Regis. By the end of the week, we were sharing a bed. "The pretrial conference is at 4, Richard continued, snapping me back to the present. "Logan's attorney is some nobody from Marietta. This should be quick." "How much are we asking for?" "Gee." "Everything we discussed. The properties, 60% of the business, $4,500 monthly in alimony, plus your Mercedes and the art collection." I thought about Logan, probably stress-eating varsity burgers right now, completely unaware that his sweet, devoted wife was about to take him for everything. He was a brilliant coder, but in the real world, he was just simple. He still used the same cracked coffee mug he'd had in college. He thought finance was just making sure the mortgage got paid. He was a lamb, and I was about to be a lion. He'd been so easy to manipulate these past months, so grateful when I'd suggested we work on our marriage after I'd gotten bored with Dimitri. So happy when I'd started initiating sex again, not knowing it made me sick to my stomach every time. "What if he fights it?" I asked. Richard finally looked up, his smile sharp as a blade. "Then we tell the court about his drinking. His anger issues, the time he threw that glass at the wall." "He was aiming for the trash can," I said. "And he'd had a bad day at work." "Doesn't matter. We have the police report from when you called. That's all we need." The police report. From that night 2 years ago when Logan found out his father had stage 4 cancer. He'd gotten drunk, the only time I'd ever seen him truly drunk, and thrown his whiskey glass toward the kitchen trash, missing by 3 feet. I'd called 911 in a moment of panic when he'd started sobbing so hard he couldn't breathe. The cops had been understanding, no charges filed, just a welfare check. But paper was paper. I remembered that night differently now than I did then. How I'd been annoyed that his grief was interrupting the season finale of something I was watching. How I'd called my sister while he was passed out on the couch, complaining about having to deal with his drama. His father died 3 weeks later. Logan spoke at the funeral about how his dad had taught him to protect what matters, to build things that last. I'd stood beside him in my new black Saint Laurent dress, thinking about how good I looked in the funeral photos. God, when had I become this person? "Trust me," Richard said. "By dinner time, you'll be a very wealthy woman." 3 hours. 3 hours until I could drop this devoted wife act and start living. First thing I'd do, book that girl's trip to Turks and Caicos, then maybe get that work done on my neck that Dr. Phillips had suggested. 60% of a $12 million company plus the real estate would set me up for life. And Logan, he'd figure it out. Men like him always did. He'd probably code his way to another fortune within 5 years. The truth was, I'd been planning this exit for 3 years. Ever since Logan had missed our anniversary dinner to close some deal with investors from Tokyo. I'd sat at Bacchanalia, watching the candle burn down, eating $60 scallops alone while the waiter kept refilling my wine with pitying looks. That's when I'd started moving money. Little bits here and there, overcharging on the household accounts, skimming from the renovation budget, returning expensive items for cash after buying them on credit. My escape fund, I called it. $40,000 hidden in a safety deposit box Logan didn't know about. But then Dimitri happened, and suddenly $40,000 seemed pathetic. Why sneak away with pocket change when I could take half of everything? The affair itself had been transactional. That's the word that fits best. Dimitri wanted a bored American housewife to worship him. I wanted to feel something other than the crushing emptiness of another charity luncheon, another soul cycle class with women who called their pills mommy's little helpers. "You are wasted here," Dimitri had whispered that second night, his hand tracing the diamonds at my throat. "In Prague, a woman like you would be treasured." Treasured. Not loved, I noticed even then. But treasured sounded better than tolerated, which is what I'd become to Logan. A beautiful accessory he'd acquired in his 20s and now didn't know what to do with in his 40s. My phone buzzed. Logan. "Hey, babe. Grabbing coffee before the meeting. You want anything? That caramel macchiato you like?" Still playing the perfect husband. Even now. Sweet, clueless Logan who thought we were having a friendly divorce. Who'd actually believed me when I'd cried and said we'd just grown apart. That no one was at fault. That we could do this amicably. "No thanks," I texted back. "See you there?" Richard's assistant knocked. "Mr. Hartley." The courier just delivered this from opposing counsel. She handed him a thick manila envelope. Strange. Logan's bargain basement attorney should have filed everything electronically. Richard opened it, his expression shifting from smug to confused to something I'd never seen before. Concern. "What is it?" I asked. He spread the documents across his desk. Financial statements, bank records, corporate filings. All of Logan's, but different somehow. "When did your husband start his company?" Richard asked slowly. 8 years ago. Why? "And you've been married 15 years? "Yes, I already told you." "Look at this." He pointed to an incorporation document. "TechFlow Solutions, LLC, founded 8 years ago. But look at the structure." I looked but didn't understand. "So?" "It's owned by a trust." "The Logan Matthews Irrevocable Trust, established 16 years ago, before your marriage." "That's impossible. He was broke when we met. He was sleeping on his brother's couch." Richard kept reading, his face getting paler. "According to this, he transferred all his assets into this trust before you got married. The beneficiary is... Hold on." He flipped pages. "The beneficiary is a nonprofit. The Matthews Foundation for Technological Education." "What?" "Your husband doesn't own his company, Veronica." "He never has. He's just the executor of a trust that pays him a salary. A modest one, according to this. $48,000 a year." But he drives a Tesla." "We live in Ansley Park. All owned by the trust. Look, more papers. Even the houses are held in trust. He's basically been a caretaker this whole time." My hands were shaking. "That's fraud. He lied to me." "Did he? Did he ever say he owned these things?" I thought back. Logan always saying, "our house," but never "my house." Always talking about running the company, never owning it. Even his car was a company car, technically. "We'll challenge it," I said. "Say the trust is a sham." "We could try, but look at this." Richard held up another document. The trust has been filing taxes for 16 years. It's donated millions to Georgia Tech, Emory, coding camps for underprivileged kids. This is ironclad. What about alimony? I've been accustomed to a lifestyle. Based on trust assets, you have no claim to. And his actual salary? After taxes, it's about $3,000 a month. Georgia caps alimony at 30% of that. $900. $900 a month. That wouldn't even cover my lunch tab at La Bilboquet. I've spent more than that on a single pair of shoes. This can't be legal. Richard was still reading, and now he looked sick. Veronica, there's more. These credit card statements, they show charges at the St. Regis, room service for 2, champagne. The dates were from my weekend with Dimitri. The weekend I'd told Logan I was at a spa in North Carolina with my sister. And these photos, grainy but clear enough, me and Dimitri in the hotel lobby, in the elevator, entering the room. How did he... There's a report here from a forensic accountant. Apparently you used the joint credit card, the one tied to the trust's expense account. Every charge was flagged because personal expenses aren't allowed on trust accounts. I thought back to that weekend, how Dimitri had laughed when I'd pulled out the black Amex. Let your husband pay for your pleasure, he'd said with that wolf smile. He owes you this much. $8,000 in 2 days. The suite, the champagne, the couple's massage, where Dimitri had done things definitely not on the spa menu. Room service oysters and caviar because Dimitri said I deserved to be spoiled. All on the trust's card. All traceable. But wait, another memory surfaced. He was in Austin that weekend for the tech conference. How could he have photos? Richard kept reading. The investigator's report shows he never went to Austin. He hired the forensic accountant that Friday. They tracked your phone to the hotel and hired a private investigator on Saturday morning. Every movement you made that weekend is documented. My phone rang. Logan. Don't answer that, Richard said, but I already had. Hey, Veronica. His voice was calm, too calm. I'm at the courthouse. My attorney says you might want to reconsider your position. Logan, 16 years ago, my grandmother died and left me a small inheritance. $50,000. You know what I did? I put it all in a trust, because I'd seen too many friends get destroyed in divorces. I swore if I ever built something, it would be protected. Not from a wife. I wasn't even dating anyone, but from myself. From ego. From greed. You lied to me? I never lied. You never asked. You saw the house, the car, the lifestyle, and assumed. Just like you assumed I'd never check the credit card statements. Just like you assumed I was too stupid to notice you were glowing after your spa weekend. My throat was closing. Logan ... You want to know the funny thing? His voice was steady, conversational almost. I was going to tell you about the trust. On our 20th anniversary, I had this whole romantic plan. I was going to explain how I'd built everything to protect our future, how the foundation would be our legacy together. I'd even drawn up papers to make you co-executor. My knees gave out. I sank into Richard's leather client chair. But then you started acting strange, he continued. Gym 5 days a week instead of 3. New lingerie that you never wore for me. And that weekend you supposedly went to the spa. Your sister called looking for you. Seemed surprised when I said you were together. Logan, please. I hired the accountant that Monday. Do you know what he found, Veronica? Besides the affair? $40,000. Siphoned off over 3 years into an account you thought I didn't know about. Planning your escape while sleeping next to me every night? He knew about the escape fund. Of course he knew. The trust has a morality clause, by the way. If I'm caught cheating, I lose my executor position. But it works both ways. If my spouse cheats, they're barred from any claims. My lawyer has affidavits from 3 Ritz-Carlton employees who saw you and Dmitry Volkov together. He knew Dimitri's last name. I'd never told anyone Dimitri's last name. Here's what's going to happen, Logan continued. You're going to accept the divorce terms my lawyer sent over. You get your clothes, your jewelry, and your car. The one in your name, nothing else. In exchange, I won't pursue charges for the fraudulent use of trust funds for your affair." Charges? $8,000 in hotel charges on a trust account. That's felony theft in Georgia. Richard was frantically writing on a legal pad, "Take the deal." "This isn't fair," I whispered. 15 years, Logan, I gave you 15 years. "No, Veronica. You took 15 years. You took them from both of us. I loved you. God help me, even knowing what you were doing. I loved you. Do you know how that feels? To love someone who's calculating how much money they can extract from you? I loved you too. Don't. Just don't. Take the deal, Veronica. Start over. Find someone who makes you actually happy instead of just rich, or don't. I honestly don't care anymore." He hung up. Richard cleared his throat. "My retainer is $25,000. I'll need that regardless of outcome." $25,000. I had maybe 30 in my personal savings. After paying him, I'd have enough for a security deposit on an apartment. Maybe. "How did he know?" I asked. "How did he know everything?" "Says here he hired the forensic accountant 6 months ago, right after you suggested working on the marriage. He must have suspected something. 6 months. While I was playing loving wife, he was documenting everything. While I was dreaming of my post-divorce life, he was building a case. While I was meeting with divorce lawyers, he was 3 steps ahead. I remembered that conversation 6 months ago. I'd just come back from what I'd told him was a weekend with my college friends, but was actually Dimitri's goodbye. He was returning to Prague, and we'd spent 48 hours in bed at the Four Seasons. I felt guilty, empty, and strangely relieved it was over. "We should work on us," I'd told Logan over dinner at home. "Maybe see a counselor, take a trip together, reconnect." He'd looked at me for a long moment, something flickering behind his eyes. "Okay," he'd said simply. "Whatever you want." I thought I was being clever, establishing a paper trail of trying to save the marriage before filing for divorce, setting myself up as the devoted wife who'd done everything she could. Instead, I'd triggered his suspicions. My sudden interest in our marriage after months of distance must have been like a neon sign flashing guilty. The next months played back differently now. Logan suggesting we eat at home more often. Was he avoiding restaurants where credit cards would be traced? His newfound interest in my schedule, was he tracking my movements? Even his sweetness, bringing me coffee in bed, asking about my day, seemed calculated now. He'd been gathering evidence while I'd been gathering assets. We took the deal. What choice did I have? In the end, I walked out of that courthouse with 2 suitcases of designer clothes, a 4-year-old BMW, and the growing realization that I'd played myself. Logan didn't even show up to the final hearing. His lawyer said he was in San Francisco, finalizing a partnership that would triple the trust's value, money I'd never touch, success I'd never share. I drove back to the Ansley Park house one last time to get my things. The locks had already been changed, but the security guard let me in to pack. Logan had left a bottle of champagne on the kitchen counter with a note. "For your fresh start. El Dom Perignon." The same champagne I'd ordered with Dimitri on the trust's credit card. He knew. He'd known everything, maybe from the beginning. And instead of exploding, instead of the drama I'd been prepared for, he'd simply protected himself. I opened the bottle and drank it straight from the neck, standing in the kitchen I'd never cook in again, looking out at the garden I'd never see bloom. 15 years, and I'd ended up exactly where I'd started. Except now I was 42 instead of 27, with a reputation that would follow me through Atlanta's social circles like a scarlet letter. The security guard knocked. "Ma'am? Mr. Matthews says you have 1 hour." I nodded, took another swig of champagne, and went to pack my life into boxes. The art I'd chosen, the furniture I'd selected, the life I'd built, none of it mine. All of it trust property, as untouchable as Logan himself had become. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Heard about your divorce. Drinks? -D Dimitri. Of course. Men like him have radar for women like me. Newly single, newly desperate, just realizing we'd overplayed our hand. I deleted the text, blocked the number. At least I could learn that much. The movers Richard recommended charged $800 to relocate my belongings to a one-bedroom in Smyrna. As I followed the truck out of the city, Atlanta's skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror, I finally understood the title of that document Richard had shown me. The Logan Matthews Irrevocable Trust. Irrevocable. Unable to be changed, reversed, or recovered. Just like the 15 years I'd wasted plotting to steal from a man who'd made himself unstealable. Just like the marriage I'd destroyed for a Czech businessman who'd forgotten my name the minute he'd boarded his flight home. Just like the future I'd gambled away. So sure the house always won. Turns out Logan was the house. And the house always wins. 6 months later, I was scanning groceries at Kroger when I saw the news on the breakroom TV. TechFlow Solutions had just been acquired by Microsoft for $1.8 billion. The Matthews Foundation would receive the largest charitable donation in Georgia history. That Logan Matthews is a saint, my coworker said. Giving all that money to education. We need more men like him. I nodded, straightened my polyester uniform vest, and went back to my register. The woman buying organic vegetables and champagne reminded me of myself a year ago. Designer handbag, wedding ring with a rock the size of a grape, that particular brand of buckhead boredom in her eyes. I'd see them sometimes, women like her. Women like I'd been. They'd come through my line at odd hours, buying wine and chocolate, their eyes red-rimmed, their credit cards sometimes declining. Divorce was expensive. Starting over at 40-something, even more so. The news kept playing Logan's statement about the sale. He looked older but good. That particular glow of a man who'd weathered a storm and come out stronger. Behind him stood a woman, pretty, professional, probably 30. His new head of operations, the Chiron said. They weren't touching, nothing inappropriate, but I recognized the way she looked at him. She looked smart and loyal. The kind of woman who would be impressed by a man who built a foundation, not just a company. The kind of woman I never was. The same way I'd looked at him 20 years ago when he was just a broke programmer with big dreams and gentle hands. Did you find everything you needed? I asked the Buckhead housewife, scanning her Dom Perignon. Having a party? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The combination of champagne, lingerie from the clothing section, and pharmacy purchases painted a familiar picture. Girls' weekend, she said, not really looking at me. My husband's at another conference. I wanted to warn her, wanted to tell her about trusts and forensic accountants and the price of champagne charged to the wrong credit card. But I just smiled and handed her the receipt. Have fun, I said. Be careful. She gave me a strange look, grabbed her bags, and clicked away in her Louboutins. I watched her go, then called the next customer. Did you find everything you needed? I asked the man buying a single frozen dinner and a bottle of wine. Everything except my dignity, he said with a rueful smile. Divorce. Wife got the house, the kids, everything. Starting over at 45. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Don't be. It's my own fault. I knew she was cheating, but I was too proud to protect myself. Thought love would be enough. He shrugged. Live and learn, right? Right, I said, handing him his change. Live and learn. He left, and I stood there at Register 6, thinking about Logan somewhere in San Francisco or Seattle, or wherever brilliant, careful men go to build new empires. He'd learned before he'd lived, set up his protections before he had anything to protect. And because of that, he'd kept everything while I'd lost it all. The forensic accountant always wins. Not because they're smarter or ruthless or cruel, but because they understand something the rest of us learn too late. In love and money, the person who cares least about protecting themselves usually needs protection the most. And I had been so busy planning my attack, I never once thought to build a defense. My shift ended at midnight. I drove my dying BMW back to Smyrna, to my apartment with its view of the highway, and poured myself a glass of the wine I could afford now. Not Dom Perignon, not even close, but it was mine. Paid for with money I'd earned, not stolen. It tasted bitter and cheap and honest. Just like the lesson Logan had taught me, one trust document at a time.